My son didn't think I was important enough to invite to his executive promotion party after I'd sacrificed everything for his success, so I made an announcement that changed both our lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined I would reach my 70s feeling like a footnote in my own life story. At 73, I had pictured these golden years as a time of family gatherings where my lifetime of sacrifices would be acknowledged, where wisdom, accumulated over decades, would be valued, where my presence would matter simply because I was mom. Instead, I found myself increasingly relegated to the margins of my son's life, useful for occasional childcare or holiday cooking, but apparently not important enough to witness his crowning professional achievement. My name is Margaret Thornton. Most people call me Maggie. I raised my son Christopher, largely on my own in Millfield, a mid-sized manufacturing town where I worked as an administrative assistant at the community college for 32 years. My husband Richard left when Christopher was just 7, claimed he wasn't cut out for family life, before relocating to Arizona with a woman from his office. The divorce left me with a mortgage, a confused little boy, and a determination that my son would never lack opportunities despite our suddenly halved household income. "We're a team, you and me," I would tell Christopher during those early years, when the pain of his father's absence was still raw. "Whatever you dream, we'll figure it out together." I meant those words with every fiber of my being, a promise that my son's path wouldn't be limited by our circumstances or his father's choices. Christopher was a bright child with a natural talent for mathematics that became apparent early on. His 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez, pulled me aside during a parent-teacher conference to say, "Your son has exceptional analytical abilities. He thinks differently than other children his age. You should nurture this gift." I took her words to heart, stretching our tight budget to afford math enrichment materials, then a used computer when he reached middle school. Nights in our home often found us at the kitchen table, Christopher working through increasingly complex homework while I balanced checkbooks, planned budgets, or completed my own continuing education assignments. The kitchen light would burn, late into the evening, our twin efforts to secure better futures illuminating the worn wooden table surface. "Mom, listen to this," Christopher would say, explaining some new mathematical concept he'd mastered. I didn't always fully understand the technical details, but I recognized the passion in his voice, the spark of genuine intellectual curiosity that I was determined to keep alive despite our limited resources. High school brought new challenges and opportunities. Christopher's academic excellence made college a clear goal, but the financial reality remained daunting. I took on additional work, weekend bookkeeping for local businesses, evening data entry for a medical office, squirreling away every extra dollar into the college fund I'd started when he was just 6 years old. "You don't have to do all this," Christopher told me during his junior year, watching me organize my multiple work schedules. "I could get a part-time job instead. Your job is to keep those grades up and focus on college applications," I insisted. "There'll be plenty of time for work later. Right now, your education is the priority." When acceptance letters arrived during his senior year, including one from Westridge University with its prestigious business program, the pride I felt was matched only by panic about the cost. After countless late nights reviewing our options, I made a decision that would shape the next 2 decades of my life. I refinanced our house, tapping the modest equity I'd built to help fund Christopher's education. "This is just a loan to yourself," I explained when he expressed concern about the financial sacrifice. "When you graduate and start your career, you'll be able to help if needed. For now, just focus on making the most of this opportunity." The day I drove Christopher to Westridge University remained vivid in my memory even decades later. The car packed with carefully labeled boxes, his expression alternating between excitement and apprehension, my own heart simultaneously swelling, with pride and constricting with the knowledge that our daily lives would no longer be intertwined. Call me anytime, I told him as we unloaded his belongings into the freshman dormitory. Day or night, doesn't matter. I know, Mom, he replied with the slight eye roll of an 18-year-old eager to begin independent life. I'll be fine. Those college years brought changes neither of us had fully anticipated. Christopher thrived academically, making connections with professors who recognized his gifts and peers from far more privileged backgrounds than ours. Meanwhile, I adjusted to an emptier house, focusing on work advancement that had previously taken second place to parenting responsibilities. Our relationship evolved through Sunday phone calls that gradually shortened as Christopher's campus. Life grew busier. Holiday visits that highlighted the growing sophistication in his speech and perspectives, and occasional financial requests when scholarship funds fell short or unexpected opportunities arose. There's this summer internship at Stanford Financial Group, he explained during his junior year. It's unpaid but could lead to a job offer. I'd need help with housing for 3 months. I immediately calculated what this would mean. Postponing. Necessary home repairs, taking on additional weekend work, stretching an already tight budget even thinner. But the excitement in his voice convinced me it was worthwhile. We'll make it work, I assured him, already mentally reorganizing my finances. This is exactly the kind of experience that will open doors. The internship did indeed open doors. Christopher returned with business cards from financial industry professionals, stories about client meetings, and a new confidence in his professional trajectory. He also returned with subtle changes in speech patterns, references to experiences I couldn't relate to, and occasionally, a barely perceptible impatience when I asked questions that revealed my limited understanding of finance. When Christopher graduated with honors in business administration, I sat in the audience wearing a dress I'd saved 3 months to afford, watching my son receive his diploma while fighting back tears of pride and exhaustion. The past 4 years had depleted my savings, added a decade to my mortgage, and postponed countless small comforts I might have allowed myself. Yet, seeing him cross that stage in his cap and gown, I felt it had all been worthwhile. I couldn't have done this without you, Mom, he said as we took photos afterward, his arm around my shoulders. The sincerity in his voice in that moment felt like validation for every sacrifice, every extra shift, every deferred dream. After graduation, Christopher secured a position at Meridian Financial Partners in the city, 2 hours away but close enough for occasional weekend visits. His starting salary exceeded what I earned after 3 decades of work, a fact that filled me with complicated emotions: pride in his achievement, satisfaction that our sacrifices had paid off, and occasional quickly suppressed twinges of envy for opportunities that hadn't existed for women of my generation. The early years of Christopher's career coincided with my approaching retirement. Weekend visits home became less frequent as his professional responsibilities grew. Our phone conversations increasingly centered on his work challenges, office politics, and career advancement strategies. I listened attentively, offering what perspective I could while recognizing the growing gap between our professional worlds. I'm up for the associate manager position, he shared during one call, excitement evident in his voice. If I get it, it would mean a significant salary increase, and my own team to supervise. That's wonderful, honey, I responded, genuinely happy for his progress while silently acknowledging another milestone that would likely increase the distance between us. When Christopher called to announce he'd received the promotion, I suggested coming to the city to take him to dinner in celebration. Thanks, Mom, but the firm is hosting a dinner for me with the senior partners, he explained. Rain check? Maybe next month when things settle down. I understood, of course. Professional obligations took precedence, especially at this crucial career juncture. I sent a congratulatory card with a modest check enclosed, far less than I would have liked to give, but what my limited budget allowed. 2 months later, Christopher called with news that would significantly alter our relationship. Mom, I've met someone. Her name is Vanessa. She's the daughter of James Woodward. He's on the board at Meridian. Over the following year, I watched through increasingly infrequent visits and phone calls as Christopher's life reorganized around his relationship with Vanessa and his advancing career. Their courtship moved quickly, accelerated by shared professional connections, and Vanessa's family's enthusiasm about Christopher's potential. I met Vanessa only twice before their engagement was announced, once during a brief Sunday brunch when they passed through town on their way to a skiing weekend, and again at Christmas when Christopher brought her to our home for a few hours before they continued to her family's lake house celebration. At 66, I found myself navigating retirement on a limited pension while planning for a son's wedding to someone I barely knew. The disparity between my financial reality and the expectations of Christopher and Vanessa's social circle became painfully apparent during wedding preparations. The rehearsal dinner is traditionally hosted by the groom's family, Vanessa mentioned during a rare planning call. Nothing too elaborate, just 40 or 50 people at the Lockwood. They have a lovely private dining room. I researched the key Lockwood that evening, discovering a fine dining establishment where entrees started at figures that would strain my monthly budget. The realization that hosting this not-too-elaborate dinner would require withdrawing from my modest retirement savings created a knot of anxiety I couldn't easily share with Christopher. When I tentatively raised financial concerns, suggesting a smaller gathering at a less expensive venue, the awkward silence that followed spoke volumes about expectations I couldn't meet. "Don't worry about it, Mom," Christopher eventually said, his voice carrying a note of embarrassment that wounded me deeply. "Vanessa's parents have offered to cover it. They understand your situation." Their understanding of my situation felt like charity rather than compassion, the uncomfortable acknowledgement that Christopher had moved into a world where my lifetime of hard work and sacrifice registered as financial inadequacy rather than parental devotion. The wedding itself reinforced this growing divide. Held at the Woodward's Country Club, the celebration featured ice sculptures, a 10-piece orchestra, and party favors that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I wore a dress I'd spent months saving for, had my hair professionally, styled for the first time in years, and still felt conspicuously out of place among guests who discussed vacation homes and investment portfolios with casual familiarity. "Your son has integrated beautifully into the Woodward circle," one of Vanessa's aunts commented during the reception, her tone suggesting she was paying me a compliment. "No one would ever guess his background." I smiled tightly, wondering, what precisely about Christopher's background needed disguising? The single mother who'd worked multiple jobs to fund his education. The modest home where he'd completed homework at a kitchen table rather than in a private study. Following the wedding, my contact with Christopher became increasingly structured around holidays and obligatory phone calls. When their first child, my grandson Ethan, was born, I offered to come help during Vanessa's recovery. "Thanks, Mom, but Vanessa's mother is staying with us for the first month," Christopher explained. "And we've hired a night nurse to help with feedings." I sent handmade baby blankets, knitted during quiet retirement evenings, and received a lovely thank you note on Vanessa's monogrammed stationery. My role as grandmother developed primarily through photos shared via email and brief visits during which I felt more like a respectful guest than family. As years passed, Christopher's career continued its impressive trajectory. I followed his professional accomplishments through occasional updates during our monthly calls and holiday gatherings that grew shorter as their social calendar filled with events I wasn't invited to join. I met his colleagues' wives exactly once at a company picnic where introductions were perfunctory and conversation quickly moved to topics that excluded me. I never explicitly complained about our diminishing connection, understanding that successful adult children naturally create lives separate from their parents. I took pride in Christopher's achievements while quietly nursing the hope that once his career stabilized and children grew, there might be more space for reconnection with the mother who had invested everything in his future. Last month, I received a call from Christopher that initially brightened my entire week. "Mom, I've got some exciting news. I've been promoted to executive vice president at Meridian. Christopher, that's wonderful. My genuine joy at his success momentarily bridged the growing distance between us. I'm so proud of you. When does this happen? It's official next week, he explained, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of someone whose hard work has been recognized. There's a formal announcement and reception on Friday. I immediately began calculating whether I could manage the 2-hour drive to the city, whether my aging car was reliable enough for the journey, what I might wear to such an occasion. The thought of witnessing this culmination of decades of sacrifice and support filled me with anticipation. What time should I arrive? I asked, already mentally preparing for the trip. Should I book a hotel room for the night? The pause that followed contained a universe of unspoken realities about our relationship. Mom, it's really just a corporate thing, Christopher finally responded, his tone carefully modulated to convey regret he didn't actually feel. Very formal, mostly board members and executive team. Partners are invited, but it's not really a family event. The distinction between partners and family landed like a physical blow. Vanessa would attend as his wife, the Woodwards likely as respected members of the business community. But the woman who had typed his college applications, who had remortgaged her home to fund his education, who had built her entire life around his opportunities. I was not considered relevant to this milestone. I understand, I said automatically. Decades of putting Christopher's needs before my own making the words emerge despite the ache spreading through my chest. Perhaps we can celebrate another time. Definitely, he agreed, relief evident in his voice. Maybe dinner next month when things settle down. After we hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by photographs chronicling Christopher's journey from smiling first grader to successful executive. Each image represented countless sacrifices, choices made with his future as the priority, opportunities I had foregone so he could advance. The college graduation photo on my mantle suddenly seemed to mock me, the proud mother who believed her son's success would eventually include, rather than exclude her. For the first time in our relationship, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge the painful truth that had been forming for years. I had become inconvenient to the very life I had helped create. My presence, with its reminder of humbler beginnings, practical education, and working-class values, didn't fit the narrative Christopher now lived within. The executive vice president with Woodward connections couldn't comfortably incorporate. A mother who still clipped coupons and drove a 12-year-old sedan. The realization brought not just sadness, but something I had rarely permitted myself to feel regarding Christopher: anger. Righteous, clarifying anger that cut through decades of reflexive self-sacrifice and accommodation. I had given everything to provide him opportunities, and he couldn't spare a single evening to include me in celebrating where those opportunities had led. That evening, something shifted inside me, a quiet but profound reorientation of my relationship with my own life. If I had become invisible within my son's carefully curated world, perhaps it was time to become visible in ways that didn't depend on his recognition or inclusion. Perhaps, at 73, it wasn't too late to reclaim the portions of myself that had been indefinitely deferred in service to someone else's journey. The next morning, I did something uncharacteristically impulsive. I called Judith, a former colleague from the community college who had been gently encouraging me for years to join her volunteer work with a literacy program for adults seeking GED certification. I'd like to help, I told her, surprising myself, with the decisiveness in my voice. I have experience with administrative systems, and I was always good at explaining complex material in simpler terms. Maggie, that's wonderful. Judith's genuine enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the careful management of my presence I'd grown accustomed to from Christopher. We're desperately short-handed, especially with the organizational side of things. When can you start? How about tomorrow? I suggested, feeling a spark of purpose that had been dormant for too long. That single phone call, made in a moment when disappointment could easily have led to deeper withdrawal, would become the first step in a transformation I couldn't yet envision. The literacy program's modest office, housed in a repurposed classroom at the community center, would become the setting for a reclamation of identity that would eventually extend far beyond volunteer work. As I prepared for my first day at the Yababe literacy program, carefully selecting an outfit and reviewing program materials Judith had dropped off, my phone rang. Christopher's name appeared on the screen, an unusual occurrence on a Tuesday morning. For a hopeful moment, I imagined he might be reconsidering the promotion reception, finding a way to include me after all. That brief fantasy dissolved as soon as I heard his voice. "Mom, I'm glad I caught you. Vanessa's parents had to reschedule their vacation, so they won't be available to watch Ethan and Sophie next weekend. I know it's last minute, but could you possibly come up and stay with the children? The timing is really critical with everything happening at work." The request was so perfectly emblematic of my assigned role in his life, useful for childcare and background support, but not welcome at public celebrations, that I almost laughed despite the ache it caused. In the past, I would have immediately rearranged any plans to accommodate this request. I would have expressed gratitude for the opportunity to see my grandchildren, downplaying any inconvenience or hurt feelings. My response would have prioritized Christopher's needs above my own, continuing the pattern established decades ago. But something had fundamentally shifted. The woman who answered was not the endlessly accommodating mother of yesterday, but someone newly awakened to her own worth. "I'm sorry, Christopher, but I have a commitment I can't change," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "I'm starting something important tomorrow, and next weekend involves training I can't miss." The silence that followed conveyed his astonishment at this unprecedented refusal. In all his life, I had never prioritized my own activities over his needs. "Training? For what?" he finally asked, confusion evident in his tone. "I've joined the adult literacy program at the community center," I explained, a quiet pride infusing my words. "They need help organizing their administrative systems and tutoring adults working toward GED certification. Can't you start that another time?" The slight dismissiveness in his question reflected years of assumptions about the relative importance of his priorities versus mine. "This is really important, Mom. With the promotion announcement and everything happening at work, I need to know the kids are with someone reliable." "I understand it's important to you," I acknowledged, "but this commitment is important to me. I've given my word to people who are counting on me being there." Another silence followed, longer, heavier, with the recognition that something fundamental had changed between us. "I didn't realize you had other obligations," he finally said, the phrase revealing volumes about how he had conceptualized my life, as essentially empty and available unless filled with service to his family. "There's quite a bit about my life you haven't realized," I replied, not unkindly but with newfound clarity. "Perhaps that's something we should discuss soon, but for now you'll need to find another childcare solution for next weekend." After we hung up, I sat with the conversation replaying in my mind. The simple act of declining a last-minute request, something most adults did regularly without second thought, felt momentous after decades of automatic accommodation. It represented not rejection of my son or grandchildren, but affirmation of my own right to make commitments that mattered to me. As I prepared for my first day with the literacy program, I couldn't have known that this small assertion of boundaries would be the first step toward a transformation that would eventually reshape not just my relationship with Christopher, but my understanding of purpose in my 70s. The woman who had defined herself primarily as someone's mother for nearly 5 decades was beginning to emerge as something more complex and self-determined, a shift that would soon lead to an announcement of my own that no one, least of all, my son, could have anticipated fade to background. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible within a family you've sacrificed everything for? Or have you realized too late that you've prioritized someone else's journey at the expense of your own? Share your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss part 2 of this story, where everything changes. The mother who had invested everything in his future. Last month, I received a call from Christopher that initially brightened my entire week. Mom, I've got some exciting news. I've been promoted to Executive Vice President at Meridian. Christopher, that's wonderful. My genuine joy at his success momentarily bridged the growing distance between us. I'm so proud of you. When does this happen? It's official next week, he explained, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of someone whose hard work has been recognized. There's a formal announcement and reception on Friday. I immediately began calculating whether I could manage the 2-hour drive to the city, whether my aging car was reliable enough for the journey, what I might wear to such an occasion. The thought of witnessing this culmination of decades of sacrifice and support filled me with anticipation. What time should I arrive? I asked, already mentally preparing for the trip. Should I book a hotel room for the night? The pause that followed contained a universe of unspoken realities about our relationship. Mom, it's really just a corporate thing, Christopher finally responded, his tone carefully modulated to convey regret he didn't actually feel. Very formal, mostly board members and executive team. Partners are invited, but it's not really a family event. The distinction between partners and family landed like a physical blow. Vanessa would attend as his wife, the Woodwards likely as respected members of the business community. But the woman who had typed his college applications, who had remortgaged her home to fund his education, who had built her entire life around his opportunities, I was not considered relevant to this milestone. I understand, I said automatically. Decades of putting Christopher's needs before my own making the words emerge despite the ache spreading through my chest. Perhaps we can celebrate another time. Definitely, he agreed, relief evident in his voice. Maybe dinner next month when things settle down. After we hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by photographs chronicling Christopher's journey from smiling first grader to successful executive. Each image represented countless sacrifices, choices made with his future as the priority, opportunities I had foregone so he could advance. The college graduation photo on my mantel suddenly seemed to mock me. The proud mother who believed her son's success would eventually include, rather than exclude her. For the first time in our relationship, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge the painful truth that had been forming for years. I had become inconvenient to the very life I had helped create. My presence, with its reminder of humbler beginnings, practical education, and working-class values, didn't fit the narrative Christopher now lived within. The executive vice president with Woodward connections couldn't comfortably incorporate a mother who still clipped coupons and drove a 12-year-old sedan. The realization brought not just sadness, but something I had rarely permitted myself to feel regarding Christopher. Anger. Righteous, clarifying anger that cut through decades of reflexive self-sacrifice and accommodation. I had given everything to provide him opportunities, and he couldn't spare a single evening to include me in celebrating where those opportunities had led. That evening, something shifted inside me. A quiet but profound reorientation of my relationship with my own life. If I had become invisible within my son's carefully curated world, perhaps it was time to become visible in ways that didn't depend on his recognition or inclusion. Perhaps at 73, it wasn't too late to reclaim the portions of myself that had been indefinitely deferred in service to someone else's journey. The next morning, I did something uncharacteristically impulsive. I called Judith, a former colleague from the community college who had been gently encouraging me for years to join her volunteer work with a literacy program for adults seeking GED certification. I'd like to help, I told her, surprising myself, with the decisiveness in my voice. I have experience with administrative systems, and I was always good at explaining complex material in simpler terms. Maggie, that's wonderful. Judith's genuine enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the careful management of my presence I'd grown accustomed to from Christopher. We're desperately short-handed, especially with the organizational side of things. When can you start? How about tomorrow? I suggested, feeling a spark of purpose that had been dormant for too long. That single phone call, made in a moment when disappointment could easily have led to deeper withdrawal, would become the first step in a transformation I couldn't yet envision. The literacy program's modest office, housed in a repurposed classroom at the community center, would become the setting for a reclamation of identity that would eventually extend far beyond volunteer work. But on that particular morning, I simply knew that I needed to redirect the energy I had endlessly poured into Christopher's life towards something that genuinely valued my contribution. If I wasn't important enough to witness my son's professional milestone, perhaps it was finally time to create milestones of my own. As I prepared for my first day at the literacy program, carefully selecting an outfit and reviewing program materials, Judith had dropped off. My phone rang. Christopher's name appeared on the screen, an unusual occurrence on a Tuesday morning. For a hopeful moment, I imagined he might be reconsidering the promotion reception, finding a way to include me after all. That brief fantasy dissolved as soon as I heard his voice. Mom, I'm glad I caught you. Vanessa's parents had to reschedule their vacation, so they won't be available to watch Ethan and Sophie next weekend. I know it's last minute, but could you possibly come up and stay with the children? The timing is really critical with everything happening at work. The request was so perfectly emblematic of my assigned role in his life, useful for childcare and background support, but not welcome at public celebrations, that I almost laughed despite the ache it caused. In the past, I would have immediately rearranged any plans to accommodate this request. I would have expressed gratitude for the opportunity to see my grandchildren, downplaying any inconvenience or hurt feelings. My response would have prioritized Christopher's needs above my own, continuing the pattern established decades ago. But something had fundamentally shifted. The woman who answered was not the endlessly accommodating mother of yesterday, but someone newly awakened to her own worth. I'm sorry, Christopher, but I have a commitment I can't change, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I'm starting something important tomorrow, and next weekend involves training I can't miss. The silence that followed conveyed his astonishment at this unprecedented refusal. In all his life, I had never prioritized my own activities over his needs. Training? For what? He finally asked, confusion evident in his tone. I've joined the adult literacy program at the community center, I explained, a quiet pride infusing my words. They need help organizing their administrative systems and tutoring adults working toward GED certification. Can't you start that another time? The slight dismissiveness in his question reflected years of assumptions about the relative importance of his priorities versus mine. This is really important, Mom. With the promotion announcement and everything happening at work, I need to know the kids are with someone reliable. I understand it's important to you, I acknowledged. But this commitment is important to me. I've given my word to people who are counting on me being there. Another silence followed. Longer, heavier, with the recognition that something fundamental had changed between us. I didn't realize you had other obligations, he finally said, the phrase revealing volumes about how he had conceptualized my life, as essentially empty and available unless filled with service to his family. There's quite a bit about my life you haven't realized, I replied, not unkindly but with newfound clarity. Perhaps that's something we should discuss soon. But for now, you'll need to find another childcare solution for next weekend. After we hung up, I sat with the conversation replaying in my mind. The simple act of declining a last-minute request, something most adults did regularly without second thought, felt momentous after decades of automatic accommodation. It represented not rejection of my son or grandchildren, but affirmation of my own right to make commitments that mattered to me. As I prepared for my first day with the literacy program, I couldn't have known that this small assertion of boundaries would be the first step toward a transformation that would eventually reshape not just my relationship with Christopher, but my understanding of purpose in my 70s. The woman who had defined herself primarily as someone's mother for nearly 5 decades was beginning to emerge as something more complex and self-determined, a shift that would soon lead to an announcement of my own that no one, least of all, my son, could have anticipated. My first day at the literacy program revealed how thoroughly I had allowed my own identity to recede during the decades of supporting Christopher's journey. As I walked into the community center that Wednesday morning, I realized I hadn't entered a new workplace environment in over 30 years. The familiar flutter of first-day nerves reminded me that I was more than just someone's mother or grandmother. I was a person stepping into unfamiliar territory, risking potential failure, embracing new challenges. Judith met me at the reception desk, her familiar face a welcome anchor in this sea of newness. At 71, she radiated the energy of someone half her age, with silver-streaked hair cut in a practical bob and reading glasses dangling from a beaded chain around her neck. "Let me show you around," she said, leading me through the modest facility, a main classroom where group sessions were held, 3 smaller rooms for one-on-one tutoring, and a tiny administrative office bursting with outdated filing cabinets and stacks of curriculum materials. "We're trying to serve 65 adult learners with 4 part-time volunteer tutors and absolutely no organizational system," Judith explained, gesturing toward the chaotic office. "Most of our students are working multiple jobs, raising families, and struggling to find consistent time for education. When they show up, we need to be ready with their materials and a clear plan, not spending 20 minutes hunting for their files." The administrative disaster before me was oddly comforting, a concrete problem I could solve, unlike the nebulous heartache of my shifting relationship with Christopher. Here was work that needed doing by someone with exactly my skills, in a place where my contribution would be valued rather than taken for granted. "I can fix this," I said with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. "Give me a week to develop a system and another week to implement it. Do we have any budget for basic supplies?" Judith laughed, a sound of both amusement and slight embarrassment. "About $200 for the entire year, and we've already spent half of it on workbooks." "I'll work with what we have," I assured her, already mentally cataloging the office supplies gathering dust in my home desk that could be repurposed here. That first day stretched into evening as I familiarized myself with the program's structure, met 2 of the other tutors, and began creating an inventory of available materials. For the first time in recent memory, I lost track of time because I was absorbed in meaningful work rather than waiting for a phone call or filling empty hours. When Judith stopped by at 6 to lock up, she found me surrounded by sorted piles of curriculum materials, color-coded labels scattered across the desk. "Maggie, you should have left hours ago," she exclaimed. "We don't expect this level of commitment on day 1. "I wanted to get a head start," I replied, surprised to discover I was genuinely reluctant to stop working. "This feels good, Judith. It feels necessary." Her expression softened with understanding. "That's the missing piece for so many of us after retirement, or when family roles change. We need to feel necessary beyond being someone's parent or grandparent." Her words crystallized something I hadn't been able to articulate: the gradual erosion of purpose I had experienced as Christopher needed me less while simultaneously making me feel less valued. The literacy program offered the opportunity to be needed in a way that acknowledged my skills and experience rather than taking them for granted. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into reorganizing the program's administrative systems. I created color-coded student files, developed a scheduling template that accommodated both tutors' availability and students' complex work schedules, and established a progress tracking system that made it easier to document learning outcomes. For the grant funding that kept the program operating, "This is transformative," Judith declared on Friday afternoon as I demonstrated how to find any student's materials within 30 seconds using the new filing system. "You've accomplished more in 3 days than we managed in the past 3 years." Her praise warmed me in a way I hadn't experienced since Christopher's early academic achievements. The difference was that this accomplishment belonged entirely to me, not as someone's mother who had sacrificed to create opportunities, but as a capable professional applying hard-earned skills to a meaningful challenge. The weekend training session that I had refused to reschedule for Christopher's childcare needs proved even more significant than I had anticipated. Designed to prepare new volunteers for tutoring roles, the 2-day workshop was led by an educational consultant who specialized in adult literacy. "Many of your students will have had negative experiences with traditional education," Dr. Renee Williams explained to our small group of volunteers. "Some were labeled as slow learners when they actually had undiagnosed learning disabilities. Others had to leave school to support families or care for siblings. Still, others came to this country with advanced degrees in their native languages, but struggle with English. Your role isn't just teaching reading or math, it's helping restore their belief in their own capabilities." Her words resonated deeply with my own journey of rediscovering capabilities that had been overshadowed by family roles. As the training continued, I found myself thinking about my administrative assistant career differently. Not just as the job that had supported my son, but as work that had developed valuable organizational skills, communication abilities, and problem-solving approaches that could now serve a broader purpose. By Sunday evening, I had not only completed the required training but had volunteered to take on 2 individual tutoring sessions in addition to my administrative reorganization project. The comprehensive nature of my involvement surprised even me. I had come seeking something to fill empty hours, but was finding instead a renewed sense of purpose and competence. Throughout the weekend, I had kept my phone nearby, half expecting Christopher to call again about childcare, perhaps with increased urgency or attempts to make me feel guilty about my refusal. But no call came. A silence that contained its own kind of message about the one-sided nature of our relationship. I was expected to be constantly available to him, but when I established a boundary, he simply found another solution rather than acknowledging my needs or expressing interest in this new commitment that was important to me. Monday morning brought my first one-on-one tutoring session with Elena, a 42-year-old hotel housekeeper working toward her GED while raising 3 teenagers as a single mother. Her determination to improve her employment prospects despite exhausting work hours reminded me of my own juggling act during Christopher's childhood, creating an immediate connection between us. "I want my kids to see that education matters at any age," she explained while working through a practice reading comprehension passage. "My oldest son says he doesn't need to finish high school because I've managed without a diploma, but I want to show him there are doors that stay closed without it." Her words sparked a realization about the unintended legacy of my own choices. In focusing exclusively on Christopher's opportunities, had I inadvertently taught him that my needs and aspirations were secondary? By accepting gradual exclusion from his life without protest, had I communicated that such treatment was what I deserved? These uncomfortable questions lingered as I guided Elena through the practice questions, impressed by her persistence despite the unfamiliar academic language. By the end of my first full week with the literacy program, I had established a regular schedule, administrative work each morning, tutoring sessions with Elena and another student named Marcus in the afternoons, and occasional evening volunteer meetings. The structure provided welcome rhythm to days that had previously stretched formlessly before me, punctuated only by Christopher's sporadic requests for assistance. The following Friday, the day of Christopher's promotion celebration to which I had not been invited, I deliberately scheduled myself for a full day at the Literacy Center, culminating in an evening planning session for an upcoming fundraiser. While I couldn't entirely banish the ache of exclusion, immersing myself in Meaningful work provided both distraction and genuine satisfaction. "You've become indispensable around here already," Judith commented as we reviewed potential donor lists that evening. "The students ask for you by name, and Dr. Williams mentioned you've got a natural talent for adult education." "It feels right," I admitted, realizing how long it had been since I'd experienced that simple sense of being in the correct place, doing work I was genuinely suited for. "I should have done this years ago instead of waiting for Christopher to need me again." Judith's expression grew thoughtful. "That's the trap so many mothers fall into, especially with only children. We structure our lives around their needs for so many years that we forget how to structure them around our own." Her insight landed with uncomfortable precision. I had been waiting. For what exactly? For Christopher to recognize my sacrifices? For his busy life to somehow create space where I would matter again? For his family to embrace me with the same enthusiasm they showed the Woodwards? The futility of this waiting suddenly struck me as not just sad, but wasteful of whatever time remained in my life. As if sensing the direction of my thoughts, Judith added, "The fundraiser planning committee could use someone with your organizational skills. We're trying to put together a community dinner to raise money for expanded programming. It's a big undertaking for our small group." The invitation to become more deeply involved with the program arrived at precisely the moment I was recognizing the need to build a life defined by my own choices rather than reactions to Christopher's. "I'd like that," I replied, feeling a small but significant shift in how I viewed my future, not as an appendage to my son's life, but as something I was actively creating through new commitments and connections. That weekend passed without contact. From Christopher. No update about the promotion celebration. No acknowledgement that this milestone we had both worked toward had officially occurred. No thanks for the congratulatory card I had mailed earlier in the week. The silence reinforced what his invitation exclusion had already communicated. My presence in his professional achievement narrative was unwelcome, perhaps even embarrassing. Sunday evening, as I prepared materials for the coming week at the Literacy Center, my phone finally rang with Christopher's name appearing on the screen. I answered with neutral politeness, uncertain what to expect after more than a week without communication. "Hi, Mom," he began, his tone carefully casual, as if our last conversation about his childcare needs hadn't ended in unprecedented boundary setting. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you," I replied, matching his light tone while withholding the details of my new activities. Something in me needed him to express genuine interest rather than receive automatic information sharing. "How was the promotion celebration?" A slight pause followed, the briefest hesitation that confirmed he hadn't expected me to directly reference the event from which I'd been excluded. "It was fine. Very corporate, just as I expected. You wouldn't have enjoyed it." The presumption that he could determine what I would or wouldn't enjoy without bothering to actually include me sparked a fresh wave of that clarifying anger I had first experienced upon learning of my exclusion. But rather than expressing it directly, I simply waited in silence for him to continue, refusing to fill the conversational gap with reassurances that it was fine, that I understood, that his choices hadn't hurt me. "Anyway," he continued after. The silence grew uncomfortable. "I was calling because Vanessa and I would like to have you over for dinner next Saturday. The kids have been asking about Grandma, and I thought it would be nice to celebrate the promotion with family too." The invitation, offered a full week after the actual celebration and framed as consideration for my feelings, might once have seemed generous. Now, with new perspective sharpening my vision, I recognized it as an afterthought designed to maintain the pattern of our relationship. Christopher determining when and how I would be included in his life, with my grateful acceptance, expected regardless of the terms. "That's thoughtful of you," I said carefully, "but I'll need to check my schedule. I've taken on several new commitments recently." Commitments? The surprise in his voice was telling, even after our previous conversation about the literacy program. He hadn't fully registered that I might have developing priorities of my own, like the literacy thing you mentioned. Yes, among other things, I replied, deliberately vague, allowing him to experience the same information limitations he had imposed on me regarding his own life. I'll check my calendar and let you know. Tomorrow if Saturday works. After we hung up, I sat with the conversation, noting how differently it had felt to engage with Christopher from a position of having my own full life rather than waiting for inclusion in his. The dinner invitation, which would once have been eagerly accepted regardless of any other plans, now required evaluation against other priorities and commitments that mattered to me. The shift wasn't about rejecting family connection, but about establishing healthier patterns within it, removing the automatic prioritization of Christopher's preferences and recognizing my own needs as equally valid. This rebalancing felt both overdue and slightly terrifying, challenging decades of ingrained maternal accommodation. The following morning, I checked the Literacy Center's calendar and discovered the fundraiser planning committee had scheduled its first major meeting for Saturday evening. Normally, I would have automatically prioritized Christopher's dinner invitation over a volunteer commitment, especially one I had only recently made. But the growing clarity about my need for purpose beyond family roles guided a different decision. Called Christopher during my lunch break. I've checked my schedule, and I can come for an early dinner on Saturday, but I'll need to leave by 6 for another commitment. What commitment could possibly be more important than dinner with your family? The slight edge in his voice revealed how accustomed he had become to my unlimited availability, despite our minimal actual contact. The literacy program is planning its annual fundraiser, and I'm on the committee, I explained, working to keep defensiveness from my tone. We have an important planning meeting Saturday evening. Can't you reschedule it? This dinner is to celebrate my promotion. The irony of his request wasn't lost on me. He wanted me to reschedule a commitment related to my new purpose in order to attend his secondary celebration, after excluding me from the primary one that actually marked the achievement. The old Maggie would have immediately acquiesced, grateful for any inclusion in his life. The emerging Maggie recognized the unbalanced expectations embedded in his request. Christopher, I've made a commitment to this group that I intend to honor, I said firmly. I'm happy to come for dinner from 4 to 6, or we could look at Sunday instead if you'd prefer a longer visit. The silence that followed communicated his struggle to adjust to this new dynamic. A mother who didn't automatically subordinate her plans to his preferences, who expected mutual accommodation rather than one-sided flexibility. Fine, he finally said, the word clipped with barely concealed annoyance. 4 o'clock on Saturday, I'll tell Vanessa. The conversation left me with mixed emotions. Sadness that establishing reasonable boundaries created such tension, pride in maintaining those boundaries despite discomfort, and lingering uncertainty about whether our relationship could evolve into something more balanced or would fracture under the pressure of changing expectations. Saturday's dinner unfolded much as I had anticipated. Christopher and Vanessa's home, a sprawling contemporary house in an exclusive suburb, reflected their financial success and Vanessa's tasteful but impersonal decorating style. Everything was coordinated, polished, and arranged for maximum impression on visitors, with few signs that young children actually lived in the space. Ethan and Sophie, now 8 and 6, greeted me with genuine enthusiasm that warmed my heart, despite the strained adult dynamics. Their delight in showing me school projects and recent accomplishments provided natural conversation during the initial awkward moments. Vanessa maintained her usual pleasant but somewhat distant demeanor, orchestrating the perfect dinner party rather than facilitating family connection. When I complimented the elaborate meal, she mentioned the catering service they regularly used for casual family gatherings, a reminder of the vast lifestyle differences that now separated my daily existence from theirs. So, tell us about this literacy program, Christopher said as we moved to the formal dining room. his tone suggesting polite interest rather than genuine curiosity. Is it something to keep you busy in retirement? The question's framing, reducing meaningful work to a time-filling activity, revealed how thoroughly he had categorized my life as essentially empty and purposeless without his family at its center. Rather than reacting defensively, I chose to answer as if he had asked with sincere interest. It's become much more than that, I explained, describing the administrative systems I had developed, the tutoring relationships I had established, and the fundraising initiative we were planning. Many of our students are working parents trying to improve their employment prospects while raising families. Their determination is truly inspiring. As I spoke about the program with genuine passion, I noticed Christopher's expression shift from perfunctory attention to something closer to surprise, as if seeing a previously unrecognized dimension of his mother. Vanessa, too, seemed to reassess me slightly as I described the grant-writing assistance I had begun providing based on my experience with college scholarship applications. That actually sounds like important work, Christopher acknowledged, a hint of genuine respect coloring his tone. I didn't realize it was so involved. Most valuable things are, I replied simply, allowing the comment to stand without elaboration about the years I had devoted to supporting his opportunities while receiving similar dismissive assessments of my contributions. The conversation shifted to Christopher's promotion, with detailed descriptions of his new responsibilities, increased staff allocation, and the strategic initiatives he would be overseeing. I listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the business aspects while noting how animated he became when discussing his professional identity, the same animation I had just displayed while discussing my volunteer work. At precisely 5:45, I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave for my committee meeting. Christopher's frown conveyed his lingering discomfort with my departure before the natural conclusion of the evening, but he made no further attempt to persuade me to stay. Grandma has an important meeting to help people learn to read, Sophie announced solemnly as I kissed her goodbye, her simplified understanding of my literacy work more perceptive than her parents had been. That's even more important than dessert. Her childish wisdom brought an unexpected lump to my throat. That's right, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to choose between things we enjoy and commitments we've made to help others. But I'll see you again very soon. As I drove toward the community center, I reflected on the subtle shifts in how Christopher and Vanessa had interacted with me when discussing my literacy work, the first glimmers of seeing me as someone with skills and purpose beyond family support. It wasn't the dramatic recognition of past sacrifices I had once yearned for, but it represented potential for a more balanced relationship moving forward. The fundraising committee meeting proved even more significant than I had anticipated. 10 volunteers gathered around a large table in the community center's conference room, including Judith, Dr. Williams, and several community members I hadn't yet met. The agenda focused on planning a community dinner and silent auction to raise $25,000 for expanded programming. Our biggest challenge is visibility, Dr. Williams explained, reviewing previous fundraising attempts. The literacy program serves a vital community need, but many potential donors don't understand the scope of adult literacy challenges or how addressing them strengthens the entire community. We need personal stories, suggested Martin, a retired marketing executive who had recently joined the volunteer team. Statistics don't open checkbooks, but authentic narratives about how literacy changes lives do. As the discussion continued, I found myself increasingly engaged with both the practical planning aspects and the underlying communication challenge. How could we effectively convey the transformative impact of literacy education to potential donors who might never have experienced educational barriers themselves? An idea began forming, drawing on my years of helping Christopher prepare persuasive scholarship applications and college essays, combined with the administrative skills I had honed during my career and the personal narratives I was now hearing from adult learners like Elena and Marcus. What if we created a presentation that paired student stories with concrete data about economic impact? I suggested during a brainstorming segment. We could show how investing in one person's literacy creates ripple effects through families and the broader community. The group's positive response to my suggestion led to my appointment as co-chair of the Presentation Development Committee alongside Martin, a responsibility I would have hesitated to accept just weeks earlier. As the meeting concluded with clear action items and timeline expectations, I experienced a sense of purposeful collaboration that had been notably absent from my life since retirement. Driving home that evening, I realized something fundamental had shifted in how I viewed myself. The woman who had left Christopher and Vanessa's carefully orchestrated dinner to attend a volunteer meeting wasn't just setting boundaries. She was actively choosing to prioritize work that aligned with her values and utilized her capabilities. This wasn't merely about saying no to excessive family demands, but about saying yes to my own emerging purpose. The following weeks brought intensifying involvement with the literacy program, alongside gradually adjusting family dynamics. Christopher's initial annoyance at my new boundaries gave way to reluctant accommodation, then gradual recognition that my volunteer work represented something meaningful rather than merely an inconvenient hobby. Mom seems different lately, I overheard him telling Vanessa during a Sunday visit 3 weeks after the abbreviated dinner at their home. More, I don't know, purposeful somehow. She's found something that matters to her, Vanessa replied, with unexpected insight. Everyone needs that, regardless of age. Their conversation, not intended for my ears as I returned from helping Sophie with a bathroom break, revealed that the subtle shifts in our relationship were visible not just to me but to them as well. The woman who had defined herself primarily through motherhood for decades was becoming someone with multidimensional identity, still a mother and grandmother, but also a literacy advocate, program developer, and community volunteer. As the fundraiser planning progressed, my role expanded beyond the initial presentation development. My organizational skills proved valuable across multiple planning aspects, from donor database management to event logistics coordination. Dr. Williams increasingly relied on my input for strategic decisions, treating me as a valued colleague rather than simply another volunteer. You have a gift for translating complex educational concepts into accessible messages, she told me after reviewing the draft presentation I had prepared with Martin. This strikes exactly the right balance between emotional appeal and substantive information. Her professional recognition of my capabilities contrasted sharply with Christopher's lingering tendency to view my activities as merely a way to fill empty hours. Though he had stopped openly questioning my commitments, his occasional comments revealed persistent difficulty adjusting to the reality that my life no longer revolved around his family's needs and schedule. I guess we need to book Grandma weeks in advance now, he remarked with forced lightness when I couldn't accommodate a last-minute request to attend Ethan's school performance. The comment was framed as a joke, but carried undercurrents of resentment that my availability was no longer unlimited. My schedule is fuller these days, I acknowledged without apology. But if you let me know about important dates with enough notice, I'll do my best to be there. This ongoing renegotiation of expectations created occasional tension, but also opened space for more authentic communication. When Christopher called to discuss holiday arrangements in early November, our conversation ventured into territory we had previously avoided. We're considering going to Vail for Christmas this year, he explained, an uncharacteristic hesitancy in his voice. The Woodwards have a lodge there, and they've invited us to join them. But I wasn't sure how you would feel about us not being here for our usual Christmas Eve at your house. In previous years, I would have masked my disappointment with immediate reassurance, prioritizing his preferences while silently nursing hurt feelings. The evolving Maggie recognized an opportunity for more honest exchange. I would miss seeing you all at Christmas, I acknowledged, allowing my genuine feelings expression without weaponizing them. It's a special tradition for me, but I also Understand you're navigating relationships with Vanessa's family and creating your own traditions. What matters most is that we find meaningful ways to connect, whether that's on the actual holiday or another time. My response, neither martyred acceptance nor emotional manipulation, created space for Christopher to engage with the legitimate complexity of adult family relationships, rather than simply managing my reactions to his decisions. "What would you do for Christmas if we went to Vail?" he asked, a question that revealed how little he had considered my life apart from its intersection with his family. "I have several options," I replied truthfully. "Judith has invited me to join her family gathering. The Literacy Center hosts a holiday celebration for students and volunteers, and I've been considering accepting an invitation to join a community travel group for seniors taking a short trip to New York to see the holiday decorations and a Broadway show." The pause that followed communicated his surprise at discovering I had a social network beyond our family connection. "You've never mentioned any of that before." "You've never asked," I pointed out gently. "And until recently, I probably would have declined any invitation that might conflict with family gatherings." That conversation marked another subtle but significant shift in our relationship. The beginning of Christopher seeing me as someone with an independent life, rather than merely an extension of his family system. While it didn't erase the hurt of my exclusion from his promotion celebration or instantly transform our relationship, it represented progress toward more balanced connection. As November advanced and the literacy program's fundraiser approached, my involvement intensified. The event, scheduled for the first Saturday in December at the community center, had grown more ambitious as planning progressed. What had initially been conceived as a modest dinner for 50 potential donors had evolved into a community celebration, expected to draw over 200 attendees, including local business leaders, education officials, and current and former literacy program participants. My role had expanded accordingly. Beyond co-creating the presentation with Martin, I now coordinated the volunteer team, managed the silent auction logistics, and served as liaison between program leadership and the catering company. The comprehensive nature of my involvement utilized organizational skills developed during decades of career experience and event planning capabilities, honed through years of orchestrating family gatherings and school functions during Christopher's childhood. 2 weeks before the fundraiser, during a final review meeting with Dr. Williams and Judith, an unexpected opportunity emerged that would test my newfound courage and self-reclamation in ways I couldn't have anticipated. "We've been discussing who should deliver the main presentation at the fundraiser," Dr. Williams began, exchanging a meaningful glance with Judith. "Given that you've been instrumental in developing the content and know it better than anyone, we believe you would be the ideal presenter." The suggestion momentarily stunned me. Public speaking had never been part of my professional role as an administrative assistant. The largest group I had ever addressed was Christopher's 6th grade class during a career day presentation nearly 30 years earlier. "I've never done anything like that," I protested, immediate anxiety rising at the thought of standing before hundreds of community members, including influential business and civic leaders. "Wouldn't Martin be better suited? He has marketing experience." "Martin is excellent at data analysis and strategy, but he lacks your personal connection to the program's mission," Judith countered. "When you speak about the impact of educational opportunity, there's an authenticity that comes from your own life experience, supporting your son's education while navigating financial constraints." Dr. Williams nodded agreement. "The most effective fundraising presentations combine head and heart. Data that makes the rational case paired with authentic storytelling that creates emotional connection. You bridge those worlds in a way none of our other volunteers can." Their faith in my capabilities both honored and terrified me. The woman I had been 6 weeks earlier, the invisible mother grateful for any acknowledgement from her son's curated life, would have immediately declined, unable to imagine herself in such a public role. But the woman I was becoming recognized This as an opportunity to further reclaim aspects of myself that had been submerged beneath decades of supporting others' achievements rather than creating my own. I would need help preparing, I said finally, neither accepting nor refusing outright. I've never given a formal presentation to a large group. We'll provide whatever support you need, Dr. Williams assured me. Professional presentation coaching, practice sessions with feedback, technical assistance, whatever would make you comfortable in the role. Can I think about it overnight? I requested, needing to process this unexpected challenge in private before committing. That evening at home, I contemplated the presentation opportunity from multiple angles. The practical aspects, memorizing key points, managing visual aids, projecting my voice effectively, created understandable anxiety. But beneath these technical concerns lay deeper questions about identity and visibility. Was I ready to step into a public role that would define me through my own voice rather than my relationship to others? Could I advocate for educational opportunity based on my own convictions rather than as an extension of maternal support for Christopher's journey? Was I prepared to be visible as myself rather than merely as someone's mother or grandmother? These questions accompanied me into restless sleep and greeted me upon waking. The answer emerged not through logical analysis, but through remembering the pain of invisibility I had experienced at Christopher's promotion exclusion, the clarifying anger that had propelled me toward reclaiming meaningful identity beyond family roles. If I declined this opportunity due to fear or lingering self-doubt, wouldn't I be perpetuating the same pattern of rendering myself invisible that I had been working to overcome? The synchronicity wasn't lost on me. Being invited to publicly present at a significant event after being excluded from one that had represented my life's primary investment. I called Dr. Williams early the next morning. "I'll do it," I said, simply, my voice steadier than my still racing heart. "I'll need all the support you mentioned, but I want to try." The following 2 weeks transformed me in ways I couldn't have predicted. Working with a retired speech professor who volunteered coaching services, I developed a 20-minute presentation that wove together compelling student stories, relevant data about literacy's economic impact, and brief references to my own experience supporting educational opportunity across generations. The coaching process itself became a journey of self-reclamation. Learning to project my voice effectively meant overcoming decades of speaking softly to avoid drawing attention. Practicing eye contact with audience members required shedding the habitual deference that had led me to look down during conversations with Christopher's colleagues or Vanessa's family. Crafting persuasive arguments about community investment in literacy education called upon intellectual capabilities I had primarily directed toward supporting others' achievements rather than advancing my own perspectives. "You're a natural storyteller," my speech coach observed during our third practice session. "When you describe Elena's determination to complete her GED while working full-time and raising teenagers, people will connect emotionally with the program's impact." "It's easier to advocate for others than for myself," I admitted, recognizing a pattern that had defined much of my life. "That's true for many women of our generation," she replied thoughtfully. "We were taught to measure our worth through service to others rather than through our own accomplishments. But effective advocacy requires recognizing your own legitimate authority and perspective." Her insight illuminated something fundamental about my journey since Christopher's promotion exclusion. I wasn't just learning to set boundaries or develop new interests. I was reclaiming the right to exist as a person with inherent value, rather than deriving worth solely from service to others. The upcoming presentation represented not just advocacy for the literacy program, but a public declaration of my own voice and perspective after decades of supporting from the sidelines. 3 days before the fundraiser, during a full rehearsal, with audio-visual equipment in the community center auditorium, I experienced a breakthrough moment. Halfway through delivering the presentation to a small audience of program volunteers, something shifted in my connection to the material. Rather than mechanically reciting practiced phrases, I began speaking from authentic conviction about educational opportunity as a transformative force, drawing on both professional knowledge and personal experience with new confidence. "That's it," Dr. Williams exclaimed when I finished, eyes bright with approval. "That's exactly the authentic voice we need for Saturday. You're not just delivering information, you're bearing witness to something you genuinely believe in." Her validation touched something profound. Recognition not just of developing presentation skills, but of emerging authentic voice after years of carefully modulating self-expression to avoid inconveniencing others or drawing attention away from Christopher's achievements. The evening before the fundraiser, I was reviewing my presentation notes one final time when my phone rang. Christopher's name appeared on the screen. An unexpected contact given our recent communication pattern of primarily logistical exchanges about visit scheduling. "Mom, I wanted to wish you good luck tomorrow," he said after initial greetings, surprising me with knowledge of the upcoming event. "Judith called to invite Vanessa and me to attend your fundraiser. She mentioned you're giving the main presentation." The information startled me. I hadn't told Christopher about my presenting role, partly from lingering hesitation about sharing my emerging accomplishments with someone who had excluded me from his, and partly from uncertainty about whether he would find it interesting or important. "Yes, I am," I confirmed, uncertain how to navigate this unexpected intersection of my new independent identity with family relationships. "It's a significant event for the literacy program. She said you've been instrumental in organizing the entire fundraiser, not just the presentation," he continued, a note in his voice I couldn't immediately identify. "She seemed to think you're some kind of organizational genius they couldn't function without." The slightly teasing tone couldn't fully mask what I now recognized as genuine surprise, perhaps even a reassessment of the mother he had relegated to background support and occasional childcare. After a brief hesitation, I decided to embrace the moment of potential reconnection, rather than maintaining protective distance. "The event has been a major undertaking," I acknowledged. "We're hoping to raise enough funds to expand programming to serve 50 additional students next year. Vanessa and I would like to attend," he said, an uncharacteristic tentativeness in his request. "If that wouldn't make you nervous or uncomfortable." The question contained layers of meaning, acknowledgement that his presence might affect my performance, recognition of our strained recent interactions, perhaps even awareness that he was now asking for inclusion in my achievement after denying me the same opportunity. "I'd like that," I said honestly, setting aside complicated emotions to focus on the potential for new patterns in our relationship. The event begins at 6 with a reception, and my presentation is scheduled for 7:15. After we hung up, I sat with complex feelings, gratification that Christopher had expressed interest in this important moment, lingering hurt that I hadn't been afforded the same consideration regarding his promotion, hope that his attendance might represent willingness to see me differently, anxiety about performing my new role with family members watching. The next morning, Saturday, December 2nd, dawned clear and cold, winter sunshine illuminating frost patterns on my bedroom window. As I prepared for the day that would culminate in my first major public presentation, I found myself thinking about the parallel universe in which Christopher's promotion exclusion had never happened, where I had accepted the limitation of his invitation policies without question, where I had never called Judith about the literacy program, where I remained primarily defined by availability for others' needs rather than commitment to my own purpose. The pain of that exclusion had catalyzed uncomfortable but necessary growth, pushing me toward long-deferred self-reclamation. Tonight's Sky presentation wasn't merely about fundraising for literacy education. It represented my own declaration of visibility and voice after decades of supporting from the margins. Whatever happened with the presentation itself, the Wednesday lunch with Christopher marked a turning point in our relationship. We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes, neutral territory that symbolized the new dynamics emerging between us. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, we sat across from each other not primarily as mother and son, but as two people engaged in genuine conversation about meaningful work and authentic identity. I've been thinking about our conversation at the fundraiser, Christopher began after we had ordered. About how I've edited my background to fit my current circumstances. I'm not proud of that. What specifically made you aware of it? I asked, genuinely curious about his evolving perspective. He considered the question thoughtfully. Seeing you in that environment Saturday night, confident, articulate, clearly respected by community leaders. It forced me to confront the contrast between how I've been perceiving you and who you actually are. He paused, discomfort evident in his expression. The truth is, I've been compartmentalizing my life for years, presenting different versions of myself in different contexts. The version at Meridian and with Vanessa's family doesn't include much about growing up in a modest home with a single mother working multiple jobs. His honesty created an opening for deeper understanding than we had shared in years. Why do you think that is? I asked, not to induce guilt, but to genuinely explore the patterns that had shaped our relationship. It started as simple impression management, wanting to fit seamlessly into corporate culture, to be seen as naturally belonging. In those spaces, he shifted uncomfortably. But over time, it became more than that. The edited version began feeling more real than the actual history, especially after connecting with Vanessa's family and their multi-generational wealth and influence. I nodded, recognizing in his admission patterns I had observed but never directly named. And where did I fit into that edited narrative? Christopher's gaze dropped briefly before meeting mine again. That's the part I'm least proud of. You became inconvenient to the story I was telling myself and others. The more I positioned myself as naturally belonging in those executive and social circles, the more difficult it became to incorporate a mother who represents a very different background. The pain of his words was offset by the unprecedented honesty between us. After decades of carefully managed conversations that maintained surface harmony while avoiding deeper truths, this direct acknowledgement of how he had positioned me in his life offered possibility for authentic connection moving forward. I understand the impulse, I said after a moment. The professional world can be unforgiving about class markers and background differences. But I hope you realize how much strength your actual journey demonstrates, the perseverance and intelligence required to create opportunities despite limited resources. That's what finally clicked for me watching your presentation, he admitted. You were talking about those literacy students with such respect for the obstacles they're overcoming, and I suddenly saw the parallels to our own story that I've been trying to erase. Their determination doesn't make them less worthy of respect. It makes their achievements more significant. Our conversation continued through lunch, venturing into territory we had carefully avoided for years. The financial sacrifices that had enabled his education, the gradual distancing as his career and social circles evolved, the implicit assumptions about my availability versus the reality of my emerging identity beyond family roles. I'd like to understand better what happened for you after I told you about the promotion event, Christopher said as we finished our meals. How did you go from that disappointment to giving keynote presentations in just 6 weeks? The question invited me to share my journey in ways I hadn't previously attempted, assuming he wouldn't be interested in the details of my volunteer work or emerging sense of purpose. As I described the literacy program, my growing involvement, and the unexpected opportunity to give the fundraiser presentation, Christopher listened with genuine engagement rather than polite disinterest. What strikes me most is that none of this is actually new for you, he observed perceptively. The organizational skills, the ability to explain complex concepts clearly, the commitment to educational opportunity, you've had these capabilities all along. You just redirected them from supporting my journey to creating your own. His insight resonated deeply. I think that's true. For decades, I poured everything into creating opportunities for you, which was a choice I don't regret. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of applying those same skills and passion to my own growth and purpose, which makes my exclusion of you from the promotion celebration even more ironic, Christopher acknowledged with visible regret. The very capabilities that helped create my success were the ones I was attempting to edit out of my professional narrative. As our lunch concluded and we prepared to return to our respective days, Christopher to his executive responsibilities, me to an afternoon tutoring session, he made a request that signaled his commitment to evolving our relationship. Would you be willing to give me a tour of the Literacy Center sometime? I'd like to understand your work more thoroughly, to see this place that's become so important to you. The invitation to share my world, rather than simply accommodating, has represented significant shift in our relationship dynamics. I'd like that, I replied honestly. How about Friday afternoon before the company holiday party on Saturday? You could see the program in action. Our Wednesday lunch marked the beginning of a gradual but meaningful transformation in my relationship with Christopher. The scheduled Friday tour of the Literacy Center provided another opportunity for him to witness directly the purpose and community I had discovered independent of family roles. "This is impressive," he commented as I showed him the newly organized administrative systems, the tutoring rooms equipped with updated materials purchased with fundraiser proceeds, and the main classroom where adult students gathered between work shifts and family responsibilities to pursue educational goals. The systems are simple but effective, I explained, aware of both pride and slight vulnerability in sharing this world with him. Many of our students are juggling multiple jobs and family responsibilities. When they manage to create time for education, we need to ensure every minute counts, no searching for materials or figuring out where they left off last session. As we observed a tutoring session through the classroom window, Christopher asked thoughtful questions about the program's approach and outcomes. His genuine interest contrasted sharply with the polite but distant acknowledgement he had previously given my activities outside of family support roles. "You've found meaningful work here," he said as our tour concluded, the observation carrying recognition rather than surprise or dismissal. "It suits you. This combination of practical organization and educational support." "It does," I agreed, simply. "It utilizes capabilities I've developed throughout my life while serving a purpose I deeply believe in." His expression grew reflective. "I've been thinking about purpose lately. At Meridian, advancement has been my primary focus for so long that I sometimes lose sight of what the work itself means beyond status and compensation." This acknowledgement of his own questioning created unexpected connection between us, each at different life stages but engaged in similar exploration of meaning and authenticity. The mother-son relationship that had been primarily defined by my support of his journey was gradually evolving into something more balanced, with space for mutual recognition of each other's growth and challenges. The company holiday party that Saturday evening represented another meaningful shift in our relationship. As Christopher's guest, I entered the elegantly decorated hotel ballroom with newfound confidence that had less to do with the setting and more with my evolving sense of self. The professional attire I had purchased for the literacy fundraiser served equally well for this corporate event, an external reflection of internal continuity across my expanding life contexts. "I'd like you to meet my mother, Margaret Thornton," Christopher said as he introduced me to colleagues and executives throughout the evening. The simple introductions carried underlying significance. He was incorporating me into his professional world rather than keeping these aspects of his life carefully separated. Most striking was his introduction to James Woodward, Vanessa's father and a senior board member at Meridian. "Margaret, I've heard much about you," James said with practiced politeness that couldn't entirely mask his assessment. "Vanessa mentioned you gave quite an impressive presentation at a community event recently." "The adult literacy fundraiser," I confirmed, maintaining comfortable eye contact rather than the deference I might once have shown toward someone of his status. We raised over $30,000 to expand programming for working adults completing their education while supporting families. That's substantial for a community organization, he noted with slight surprise. What's your background in fundraising? The question might once have intimidated me, highlighting my lack of formal credentials in nonprofit development. Tonight, secure in my demonstrated capabilities rather than official qualifications, I responded with straightforward confidence. My background is primarily in administrative systems and educational support, I explained. But I've found those skills transfer effectively to program development and community engagement. Sometimes the most valuable expertise comes through practical experience rather than traditional pathways. Christopher's slight smile suggested appreciation for my poised response, perhaps recognition that I was navigating his professional world with the same competence I brought to the literacy program. Throughout the evening, I engaged in conversations about community development, educational opportunity, and corporate social responsibility with executives and their partners, contributing perspectives informed by both my recent literacy work and decades of supporting educational achievement through limited resources. You're completely at ease here, Christopher observed during a quiet moment as we waited at the bar for drinks. I spent years worried about how you would navigate these environments, but you're more comfortable than half the executives' spouses. The settings may be different, but authentic engagement with people remains the same regardless of context, I replied, the insight emerging from recent months of connecting with literacy students, community leaders, and now corporate executives, with equal genuine interest. When you're secure in your own purpose and contribution, external trappings matter less. His thoughtful nod suggested the observation resonated beyond immediate circumstances. As the evening continued, I found myself in extended conversation with Meridian's Director of Community Engagement, Martin Chen, who expressed interest in the literacy program's approach to measuring educational outcomes and community impact. We're always looking for effective local partners for our community investment initiatives, he explained. Organizations that can demonstrate measurable results while addressing systemic challenges are surprisingly rare. Dr. Williams has developed excellent tracking systems for both individual progress and community-level impact, I noted, naturally transitioning into advocacy for the program that had become so meaningful. I'd be happy to connect you directly if Meridian might have interest in supporting adult literacy initiatives. By evening's end, I had not only survived the corporate holiday party, but actively engaged within it, exchanging contact information with Martin Chen and several other Meridian executives interested in the literacy program's work. The woman who had been excluded from Christopher's promotion celebration was now comfortably navigating his professional environment, not as an extension of his identity, but as someone with relevant expertise and perspective of her own. Tonight went well, Christopher commented as he drove me home afterward. Several people mentioned how much they enjoyed talking with you. I enjoyed the conversations as well, I replied honestly. Martin seemed particularly interested in potentially supporting the literacy program. Christopher's expression registered surprise followed by thoughtfulness. It never occurred to me that your volunteer work might intersect with Meridian's community initiatives. That would be an interesting connection. His comment revealed ongoing adjustment to seeing me as someone with independent purpose that might occasionally align with rather than merely support his own professional world. The relationship was rebalancing, not erasing our mother-son connection, but allowing space for mutual recognition of each other's distinct contributions and capabilities. The weeks following Christopher's holiday party brought continued evolution in both my literacy program involvement and our gradually transforming relationship. Martin Chen followed through on his expressed interest, scheduling a January meeting with Dr. Williams, Judith, and me to discuss potential partnership between Meridian's community investment initiatives and the adult literacy program. Meridian has committed to focusing this year's community grants on educational initiatives that address systemic barriers, Martin explained during our meeting. Your program's combination of practical skills development and measurable outcomes aligns perfectly with our objectives. The resulting partnership exceeded our modest initial expectations. Rather than the small programmatic grant we had anticipated, Meridian committed to a 3-year investment that would allow substantial expansion of services, technology upgrades for student use, and development of a formal curriculum that could potentially be replicated in other communities. Most surprisingly, the partnership included provision for a part-time paid program development coordinator, a position Dr. Williams immediately encouraged me to consider. The role essentially formalizes what you've already been doing voluntarily, she pointed out during a private conversation after the Meridian meeting. Coordinating administrative systems, developing presentation materials, tracking program outcomes, plus the community engagement you've demonstrated so effectively. The prospect of returning to paid employment at 73 had never entered my consideration when I first called Judith about volunteering. After decades defining myself primarily through family support roles and viewing my administrative career as merely the means to fund Christopher's opportunities, the invitation to apply professional skills toward compensated leadership in meaningful community work represented profound shift in how others valued my capabilities, and how I had come to value them myself. I would need to maintain flexibility, I responded, carefully considering practical implications. I have commitments to my current tutoring students that I wouldn't want to abandon. We're envisioning approximately 20 hours weekly, scheduled according to program needs and your availability, Dr. Williams clarified. The position description was actually developed with your demonstrated capabilities in mind, though we would follow formal hiring processes. After thoughtful consideration and consultation with Judith about realistic time commitments, I submitted my application for the Program Development Coordinator position in late January. The interview process, my first formal job interview in over 30 years, initially triggered anxiety about competing against candidates with more recent professional experience or formal nonprofit credentials. Trust your demonstrated capabilities, Judith advised as I prepared. You've already been performing most of these functions effectively as a volunteer. The interview is simply opportunity to articulate the value you've already been creating. The 3-person interview panel included Dr. Williams, a board member from the community center, and Martin Chen representing Meridian's community investment program. Their questions focused on practical approaches to program development, strategies for measuring educational outcomes, and techniques for engaging community partners, all areas where my recent literacy program involvement had provided relevant experience. What first drew you to adult literacy work? Martin asked toward the interview's conclusion, the question shifting from technical qualifications to underlying motivation. The question invited reflection on the journey that had brought me to this unexpected juncture, from the painful exclusion from Christopher's promotion celebration to finding purpose beyond family roles. Rather than sanitizing this evolution, I decided to answer with authentic acknowledgement of my path. My involvement began during a period of personal reflection about purpose beyond family roles, I explained candidly. Having spent decades supporting educational opportunity for my son, I recognized that many adults never received similar support for their own educational journeys. The literacy program offered opportunity to apply skills I've developed throughout my life toward addressing systematic barriers many working adults face when returning to education. My transparency about personal evolution alongside professional capabilities seemed to resonate with the panel. 2 days later, Dr. Williams called to offer me the position, which I accepted with both excitement about this unexpected new chapter and momentary trepidation about formally re-entering professional identity after so many years defined primarily through unpaid family and volunteer roles. Christopher's reaction to my new professional role revealed continued evolution in his perspective. Program Development Coordinator, he repeated when I shared the news during our now regular Sunday phone conversation. That's significant recognition of what you've accomplished there in just a few months. It's part-time, I clarified. Still, adjusting to this unexpected twist in my 70s. 20 hours weekly, focused on expanding the program with the Meridian funding. Still, it's impressive, he insisted, genuine respect evident in his tone. From initial volunteer to paid. Leadership position in less than 4 months, while creating a corporate partnership with Meridian in the process. Many of our junior executives wouldn't manage comparable results. His sincere acknowledgement of my professional capabilities, framed through the business metrics he understood rather than patronizing surprise at my competence, reflected significant shift in how he conceptualized my identity and contribution. The mother he had once relegated to background family support was now someone whose professional achievements warranted genuine recognition by the standards he applied in his executive world. My first official day as program development coordinator coincided with Christopher's birthday in early February. After completing initial paperwork and orientation procedures, I found myself reflecting on the remarkable trajectory of the past 3 months, from hurt exclusion from Christopher's promotion celebration to professional leadership in a program, addressing educational barriers. The woman who had once defined herself primarily through supporting his achievements was now creating meaningful impact through her own. That evening, Christopher and Vanessa hosted a small family dinner celebrating his birthday. As we gathered in their formal dining room, Ethan and Sophie excited about cake, Vanessa orchestrating perfect presentation, Christopher relaxed after a successful quarterly review at Meridian, I recognized subtle but significant shifts in family dynamics since my transformation began. Grandma has a new job helping people learn to read, Sophie announced as we settled around the table, clearly having absorbed this update about my life. She gets paid now instead of just volunteering. That's right, I confirmed, touched that my grandson had registered this development as important enough to share. I started officially today, though I've been doing similar work as a volunteer since November. Is it weird going back to work at your age? Ethan asked with the direct curiosity of an 8-year-old, causing Vanessa to wince slightly at his phrasing. Rather than taking offense, I appreciated his genuine interest. It feels right, actually. The work matters to me, and it uses skills I've developed throughout my life. Age doesn't determine when you can contribute meaningfully, just how you might do it differently based on your experience. That's valuable perspective, Vanessa commented, surprising me with engagement beyond polite acknowledgement. Many of my colleagues are already anxious about career longevity in their 40s, as if professional relevance has some arbitrary expiration date. Her observation opened conversation about evolving career patterns, meaningful work across life stages, and societal assumptions about age and contribution. Throughout the discussion, my perspective was sought and valued rather than merely tolerated. A subtle but meaningful shift in family dynamics that paralleled my changing self-perception. As the dinner concluded and Christopher opened birthday gifts, he saved for last a small package I had brought, a framed photograph of his 6th grade science fair project, where he had won first place for an experiment demonstrating principles of compound interest through creative visualization. I remember this, he said, genuine warmth in his expression as he studied the image of his younger self standing proudly beside the display. You helped me stay up until midnight finishing the presentation boards when the computer at the library crashed and we lost the original printouts. You did the actual work, I reminded him, appreciating his acknowledgement of my support while also recognizing his own achievement. The persistence you showed that night foreshadowed your later success. You never gave up despite the setback. What made this exchange different from previous reminiscences was the balanced recognition, acknowledgement of both his achievement and my supporting role, rather than either being minimized or overemphasized. The mother-son relationship that had become unbalanced through decades of my automatic accommodation, and his growing dismissal was gradually re-equilibrating toward healthier patterns of mutual respect. As winter turned toward spring, My work with the literacy program expanded alongside continuing evolution in family relationships. The Meridian funding allowed implementation of several initiatives I had envisioned during my volunteer period: a structured mentorship program, pairing current students with successful graduates, technology resources enabling flexible learning options for working adults, and systematic tracking of both educational outcomes and economic impact for participants and their families. Christopher's interest in my professional activities shifted from polite acknowledgement to genuine engagement, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about program development challenges or sharing relevant insights from his corporate experience. Vanessa, too, demonstrated evolving perspective, eventually volunteering her event planning expertise for the literacy program's spring recognition ceremony, honoring student achievements. Most significantly, my relationships with Ethan and Sophie deepened beyond the limited grandparent role I had previously occupied. Rather than interactions structured entirely around their parents' scheduling needs, our time together increasingly included genuine sharing of experiences and interests across generations. "Can I interview you for my school project?" Sophie asked, during a Sunday visit in late March. "We're supposed to talk to someone who has an interesting job helping the community." Her request, choosing me for her assignment rather than her father or mother with their prestigious careers, revealed how thoroughly my transformation had registered even with a 6-year-old. The grandmother who had once been primarily valuable for childcare availability was now someone with meaningful work worth documenting for a school project. As spring advanced toward summer, I found myself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had begun with painful exclusion from Christopher's promotion celebration just 6 months earlier. The program development coordinator role had evolved to include community presentations about the literacy program's impact, collaborative work with other educational initiatives, and mentorship of 2 new part-time staff members implementing systems I had initially developed as a volunteer. Christopher and I settled into new relationship patterns balanced between family connection and mutual respect for separate professional identities. During a particularly honest conversation in May, he acknowledged the healthier dynamics emerging between us. "I realize now how much I had compartmentalized you," he admitted during a walking conversation through the park near my home. "You were mom in a very limited sense, available for family gatherings, childcare, holiday hosting, but I never really engaged with your full personhood outside those roles." "That's a common pattern between adult children and parents," I observed, neither absolving him of responsibility nor dwelling in resentment, especially when the parent has centered their identity around supporting the child's development for decades. It creates grooves that can be difficult to step out of. "Still, I missed knowing you more fully," he reflected. "Watching you develop. This new chapter has made me realize how much complexity and capability I was failing to recognize or engage with. It makes me wonder what Dad would think of your transformation." The reference to Richard, who had abandoned our family when Christopher was 7, momentarily startled me. "Your father made his choices long ago," I said carefully. "I stopped considering his perspective on my life decades ago." "Of course," Christopher acknowledged quickly. "I just meant, he missed seeing the remarkable person you've become. That seems like his loss." The observation, framing my development as something valuable that his absent father had missed witnessing, rather than questioning why I hadn't demonstrated these capabilities earlier, reflected Christopher's evolving perspective on my independent identity and worth. By early summer, the adult literacy program's expanded initiatives showed promising initial results. Working student enrollment had increased 40%, graduate employment outcomes demonstrated measurable improvement, and community partnerships had expanded beyond Meridian to include several other local businesses and foundations. My role continued evolving to match program growth and my demonstrated capabilities. When the community center's education director announced retirement plans, Dr. Williams approached me about potential interest in expanding my responsibilities to include oversight of additional educational initiatives beyond adult literacy. The Community Education Department needs someone with your organizational skills and vision, she explained during a planning meeting in mid-June. The position would involve coordinating all educational programming, literacy, senior enrichment, courses, youth development, and workforce training. The suggestion of further professional expansion at 73 both honored my capabilities and raised practical questions about balance between meaningful work and other life dimensions. After thoughtful consideration of both professional, opportunity, and personal priorities, I proposed an alternative approach, maintaining my current role while developing transition systems to ensure program sustainability regardless of specific personnel. My greatest value might be in creating structures that will outlast any individual's involvement, I suggested, applying lessons from corporate succession planning Christopher had occasionally discussed. The program shouldn't depend entirely on any single person's continued participation, including mine. This perspective, prioritizing program sustainability over personal advancement while maintaining significant, meaningful contribution, reflected integration of professional capability with the wisdom of my life stage. Rather than automatically accepting expanded responsibility or declining due to age concerns, I contributed most effectively by applying both practical skills and long-term perspective toward institutional strength, regardless of individual transitions. As my first anniversary with the literacy program approached in November, Christopher invited me to lunch at an upscale restaurant near Meridian's headquarters. The setting, elegant without being intimidating, located in his professional territory rather than neutral ground, suggested deliberate choice rather than mere convenience. "I have something important to discuss," he explained after we had ordered, his expression both serious and slightly nervous. Meridian is launching a community foundation focused on educational equity across our operational regions. The board has been interviewing potential directors to establish initial programming and partnership criteria. I listened with genuine interest, appreciating his professional developments while uncertain how this connected to our lunch discussion. Christopher continued after a brief pause, his next words catching me completely by surprise. "Several board members who have followed the literacy program's expansion suggested you might be an ideal candidate for the advisory council, specifically because of your demonstrated ability to develop practical programs addressing educational barriers while measuring meaningful outcomes." The invitation represented extraordinary evolution in both Christopher's perception of my capabilities and Meridian's formal recognition of my professional contribution, neither defined through family connection, but through demonstrated expertise and community impact. "This wouldn't be a token position or family courtesy," Christopher clarified, apparently reading my momentary hesitation accurately. "The Advisory Council will influence millions in educational investment across multiple communities." Several board members who attended literacy program events specifically requested your inclusion based on program results. The invitation required careful consideration of both professional opportunity and relational implications. While the advisory role represented meaningful recognition of my capabilities, joining a foundation directly connected to Christopher's corporation could potentially complicate our gradually rebalancing relationship. "I appreciate the consideration," I responded thoughtfully. "Before discussing further, I would want to understand the specific expectations, time commitment, and how potential conflicts of interest would be managed given our family relationship." Christopher's expression registered approval of my measured response rather than immediate agreement or refusal. "That's exactly the kind of careful consideration the role requires," he noted. "I can arrange a proper briefing with the Foundation development team if you're potentially interested." After thorough discussion with both Christopher and Meridian's Foundation Development Director, I ultimately accepted a position on the Advisory Council with carefully defined parameters, ensuring both meaningful contribution and appropriate independence from Christopher's direct professional sphere. My role would focus specifically on evaluation criteria for community-based educational initiatives, drawing on direct experience developing and measuring outcomes from the literacy program's expansion. "They're fortunate to have your perspective," Judith commented when I shared the Foundation advisory role news. "You bring practical understanding of both program implementation challenges and meaningful outcome measurement that many professional philanthropists lack entirely." Her observation highlighted the unique value my life path contributed to current professional roles, the administrative skills developed during my career, the resourcefulness honed through supporting educational achievement with limited means, the practical problem-solving strengthened through decades of family responsibilities, all now directed toward community impact through both the literacy program leadership and Foundation advisory positions. As the anniversary of Christopher's promotion exclusion approached in November, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation catalyzed by that painful moment. The woman who had sat alone in her living room feeling invisible and irrelevant after learning she wasn't welcome at her son's celebration had discovered purpose, community, and professional identity that extended far beyond family roles. Most significantly, the relationship with Christopher had evolved from unbalanced patterns of my automatic accommodation and his dismissive marginalization toward mutually respectful engagement that honored both family connection and independent identities. While not perfect, occasional tensions still emerged when old patterns reasserted during stress or family gatherings. The fundamental dynamics had shifted toward healthier balance for both of us. During our regular Sunday call in mid-November, Christopher raised the approaching anniversary himself. "It's been almost exactly a year since my promotion," he noted, uncharacteristic hesitation in his voice. "Since I made the decision that ultimately led to so much change for both of us." "It has," I acknowledged, neither minimizing the initial pain nor dwelling in lingering resentment. "An unexpected catalyst for necessary growth. I've been thinking about how differently everything might have unfolded if I had simply included you in that celebration," he reflected. "You might never have called Judith about the literacy program, might never have discovered this new chapter that's benefited so many people beyond just yourself." His observation resonated with my own reflections about how moments of pain sometimes become doorways to necessary transformation. "That's often how growth works," I agreed. "The comfortable patterns rarely prompt us toward needed change. Sometimes exclusion creates space for new inclusion of a different kind." "Still, I'm sorry for the pain my decision caused," Christopher said simply, even while recognizing the positive developments that eventually emerged from it. "I've come to see that exclusion as a gift of sorts," I admitted. "Painful in the moment, certainly. But without it, I might have continued indefinitely in patterns that weren't serving either of us well. Being perpetually available but rarely central to your life, supporting everyone else's journeys while deferring my own indefinitely." Our conversation continued with unusual openness about how the past year had transformed both our individual paths and shared relationship. Christopher acknowledged his growing recognition that my development benefited our family connection rather than diminishing it, while I expressed appreciation for his willingness to evolve alongside my changing identity rather than resisting. Healthy rebalancing of our relationship. The following week, exactly 1 year after the promotion celebration from which I had been excluded, the literacy program hosted its annual fundraiser, now expanded into a community celebration highlighting both student achievements and program impact. As program development coordinator, I had primary responsibility for organizing the event, coordinating volunteer committees, and developing presentation materials demonstrating the program's remarkable growth. Standing at the community center, entrance greeting arriving guests, now numbering over 300 compared to the previous year's 200, I felt momentary disorientation at how thoroughly my life had transformed in just 12 months. The woman who had once measured her worth primarily through availability to family needs now led meaningful community initiatives, managed staff members, advised a corporate foundation, and had rebuilt family relationships on healthier foundations of mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. Christopher and Vanessa arrived early, both now genuinely engaged with the literacy program's work rather than merely fulfilling family obligation through their attendance. More surprisingly, they were accompanied by James and Eleanor Woodward, Vanessa's parents, who had expressed interest in the program following conversations about my foundation advisory role. "Margaret, the transformation of this space is remarkable," James commented as he surveyed the elegantly arranged community center. "Vanessa mentioned you've been the driving force behind the program's expansion this past year." "It's been a collaborative effort," I replied, maintaining the balanced perspective that neither minimized my significant contribution nor failed to acknowledge the team involved. The Meridian funding allowed implementation of program components we had envisioned but couldn't previously resource adequately. As we continued conversation about educational equity, workforce development, and community investment strategies, I recognized subtle but significant shift in James's engagement. Speaking with me as a professional peer in community development rather than merely his son-in-law's mother. The woman who had once felt conspicuously out of place at Woodward family gatherings was now navigating conversation about meaningful community investment with genuine confidence in her perspective and contribution. Throughout the evening, I moved between multiple roles: coordinator ensuring event logistics proceeded smoothly, program representative engaging potential donors, mentor supporting newer staff members in their responsibilities, and family member connecting with Christopher, Vanessa, and the Woodwards during appropriate moments. The fragmented identity that had once existed between family support roles and individual purpose had integrated into coherent wholeness, with each aspect informing and strengthening rather than competing with others. After Dr. Williams delivered opening remarks highlighting the program's growth and impact, she introduced me for the main presentation, now an established tradition building on the previous year's successful fundraising speech. As I approached the podium amid warm applause, I caught Christopher's eye in the audience, his expression conveying genuine pride and respect rather than surprise at my capabilities. 1 year ago, I stood at this podium as a volunteer just beginning. To understand the transformative power of adult literacy education, I began, acknowledging the journey's progression. Today, I speak as Program Development Coordinator for an initiative that has expanded to serve over 200 working adults reclaiming educational opportunity while supporting families, contributing to our workforce, and strengthening our community. For the next 25 minutes, I guided the audience through program developments, student achievements, and strategic initiatives implemented through expanded community support. The nervous presenter of the previous year had been replaced by someone confidently communicating both statistical outcomes and compelling human stories about educational transformation across generations. When we make educational opportunity accessible regardless of age or circumstance, I concluded, approaching the presentation's end, we affirm that growth remains possible throughout life's journey. The mother completing her GED while raising teenagers, the grandfather learning digital skills to secure employment after factory closure, the immigrant professional recertifying in their field of expertise. Each demonstrates that detours and delays need not become permanent barriers to meaningful achievement. As applause followed my concluding remarks, I recognized that I was speaking partly about my own journey, as well as those of our literacy program participants. The transformation catalyzed by painful exclusion from Christopher's promotion celebration had demonstrated in my own life the principle I now advocated professionally, that growth, purpose, and meaningful contribution remain possible at every life stage when supported by appropriate opportunity and community. The fundraiser's success exceeded even our expanded expectations, raising over $50,000 to support program continuation and further expansion. As volunteers and staff gathered for a brief celebration after guests departed, Dr. Williams offered perspective that captured the program's remarkable evolution. A year ago, we were hoping to raise enough funds to serve 50 additional students, she noted, surveying our tired but satisfied team. Tonight, we secured resources to potentially double our current enrollment while expanding into 2 neighboring communities. That trajectory of impact began with Margaret joining our volunteer team and bringing fresh perspective on both program development and community engagement. Her acknowledgement of my catalytic role, neither minimizing the team effort involved nor understating my significant contribution, reflected the balanced recognition I had come to value in both professional and personal contexts. The transformation begun through painful exclusion had created ripple effects extending far beyond my individual journey, touching hundreds of adult learners and their families through expanded educational opportunity. After the team dispersed and final cleanup tasks were completed, Christopher waited to drive me home as we had arranged earlier. As we walked toward his car in the quiet community center parking lot, exactly 1 year after the promotion celebration, from which I had been excluded, he offered observation that captured our parallel journeys of transformation. A year ago, I was celebrating professional achievement while carefully editing my background to fit expectations, he reflected. Tonight, I witnessed my mother leading community transformation while integrating all aspects of her experience into meaningful impact for hundreds of families. I think I'm finally understanding what genuine success actually looks like. His insight, recognizing value beyond professional advancement or social positioning, suggested his own growth alongside my transformation. The son who had once compartmentalized me into limited family support roles was developing more integrated perspective on meaningful achievement that incorporated authentic connection and community impact alongside professional advancement. As we drove through quiet evening streets toward my home, Christopher asked question that revealed continued evolution in his thinking. Do you ever wonder how differently things might have unfolded if I had simply included you in last year's promotion celebration? The question invited reflection on how moments of pain sometimes become necessary catalysts for growth that comfort cannot provide. I might never have called Judith about volunteering, I acknowledged. Might never have discovered this new chapter or the capabilities that had been dormant for so long. So, in a strange way, my worst moment as a son ultimately created space for your most significant personal renaissance, he observed with rueful self-awareness. Life rarely follows the paths we anticipate. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.